Let's talk about implementing FFT. Now, what's going to be different about this discussion as opposed to other discussions about implementing other models is that we have a particular way of implementing FFT that tries to balance the model, the lens, and the feedback and voice of the client and put those together so that constantly, session by session, you can make a plan that both fits the phases of change that are inherent in the FFT model and the unique feedback that's coming from the clients. Remember what that feedback is. That feedback is feedback about how well treatment is going, how much progress they feel, and the impact you're having. The value of that evidence, the value of that session-by-session feedback is that it helps you match the treatment model to the client. Now remember, any treatment model, even FFT, is pretty broad. It takes the voice of the client, it takes evidence session by session to be able to adjust and match and fit the treatment to the client. And remember, that's one of the objectives of FFT. We take the responsibility of fitting the treatment to the unique characteristics of the client. Now, here's your goal and your challenge at the same time. Remember, in FFT, we're going to enter into helping an individual through the family. We're going to ask them to walk the pathway of change that's inherent in FFT in order to help an individual stabilize their mental health concerns, get out of the child welfare system, improve their behavior, whatever the final outcome might be. Now, we do that within a community context, of course, so that we have to adjust and change according to the needs of the system they're in and according to the unique challenges of the community. Here's the challenge in the entire thing, which is it's a complicated system. It's an interactive and it's an interconnected system of different people, both within and without the system. So bringing the unique family relational lens of FFT to understanding this is a goal. It's your challenge, and it's probably the most important skill that you can have in implementing FFT. Let's look at the FFT clinical map, because that's what you have to bring to families. Remember, the goal of having a map is that you can be purposeful in your practice. What that means is that you can follow a pathway of change that has good scientific evidence, as opposed to following the immediate needs of what someone might be experiencing, and therefore becoming a little bit like chasing a cat chasing its tail around and around while moving forward. The idea is to incorporate the needs of the family, session by session, into the discussion, and at the same time help them move along the change map that's FFT. It starts, of course, with engaging and motivating, and the goal at first is you have to find a way within the complicated discussions with the whole family to build alliance between them. Remember, that's going to happen through reframing. In addition, also through that discussion, you're going to help reframe and refocus the problem definitions of each person so that they go from being blaming to being focused on the family, where everybody has a part and everybody has responsibility. The biggest blockage to engagement, of course, is negativity and blame. Reducing that through reframing is what helps you build hope and therapeutic motivation to be part of the intervention. In the middle phase, remember, built on the good climate, built on the family-to-family alliance, there's now the possibility to say to the family, let's now come up with a new skill that will help solve these more immediate daily things. Now, what's important about this is that by the time you introduce the skill, they are on the same page. They each feel responsible and they each have a part in what goes on. Therefore, the motivation to do something new is high. And what we're looking for is that their ability not to role play, not to talk about the skill, but to use it in the room with you, use it in the session with you, so that they can ultimately take that skill and use it in other contexts. Finally, before you're finished, the generalization phase. And generalization is far more than closing the case. The generalization phase is one in which we're going to step back. We're going to help the family sit and work within their new set of skills and their new climate. The notion here is we want to help them stay changed. That's the maintenance part. Now, to do that, we're going to help them stay on the wagon, so to speak, help them keep using the new skills. And when they run into a challenge and they have a relapse, we're going to help them get started again. But secondly, We're also going to help them generalize what they've experienced in the behavior change phase with certain events in their family, school, hospitalization, something happening in the justice system. We're going to take those new events and help families generalize the skills that we may have taught them in other areas to those new events. Generalization is not an automatic process once someone learns a new skill. Generalizing to new areas is something that's quite hard for families. Generalizing, helping maintain through relapse prevention, and supporting changes by building within family, within extended family, and within community supports. Now, the second goal that you have is this complicated goal of helping the family navigate the system. Now, navigating the system comes through the case management activities that we've been talking about. The goal here is to help the family be skilled, confident, and have the ability to navigate the mental health or the complicated system in which they're in. Now, the idea here is this. The idea is if we can empower the family to know where to go, who to ask, what to look for, and to be good consumers of the system while at the same time working in alliance with the system, we will help prepare them for a lifelong ability to manage their family within the context in which they live. Now, that might be managing expectations from child welfare or expectations from mental health. It might be safety monitoring, something to do with the legal system, something to do with courts and domestic violence and practical needs. It's very much focused on helping not just families get what they need, but helping them ultimately learn how on their own to navigate the complicated system in which they're in. Now, what's important in this is that each of these case management activities, safety monitoring, helping with practical needs, how it gets delivered is based upon the phase in which it occurs. So, for example, if you're going to help with rent assistance in the engagement motivation phase, it's very helpful to link them and help them get that assistance quickly. In the behavior change phase, it's more important to help the family use their communication skills to get that on their own and stand behind them and prop them up. And in the generalization phase, let them do it on their own, but be there to help them going and not let them give up. Case management activities regarding navigating the systems happen through a therapeutic lens. Now, we know this about FFT, and this is an important thing to know as you go into implementing it. FFT has a long history of positive outcomes. However, every outcome of FFT is not positive. FFT can also be harmful, like any psychological intervention. It's most effective when it's delivered with adherence and competence on your part. What that means is, in a surprising way, the best outcomes you can have for a family are to follow the model. Do your best to match the model to the client. We have evidence, we have studies that show that if you follow the model, the outcomes will be good. So, for example, we have a study that shows that good adherent FFT therapists produce positive changes, the blue line. Red is bad FFT, and yellow, of course, is no treatment at all. Non-adherent, non-competent FFT, it isn't that it causes harm, but it doesn't, the likelihood of a positive outcome is low. The same finding we found in Ireland, where dropouts had the worst outcomes, low adherent therapists the next worst, and the high adherent therapists, the therapists that follow the model in every clinical decision they have, are the ones that have the highest and the most positive outcomes. So as we talk about implementing FFT, what's really important to remember is all the tools we've created for you, the clinical decision-making tools, the supervision process, and things like that are all oriented towards helping you be adherent to the model so that those adherent activities can produce positive changes for the family. Now, what makes FFT effective, as we've talked about as you go into implementing it, are three things: that you wear the glasses and you look through the lens to understand problems and how families work, that you follow the map and let your session-by-session activities be determined by that phase, and then incorporating in an artful way the things that the family bring each session into that phase. Now, to do that, of course, a different way to think about it is we have a model and we have a lens and we have tools to help you match to the family. What's it take in the real world? Because in the real world, it's far more complicated than just something theoretical. Certainly it takes knowledge. That's what you're learning here in Adaptware. And that knowledge is about child welfare and mental health, and it's about juvenile justice. It's about communities. It's about values. It's about understanding families. There's a second different kind of knowledge as well. That's the knowledge that it takes to translate into practice what you know to help whatever you know fit a family. Those two things happen when this occurs in practice. First, purposeful practice. That at any point in time you can say that I did this activity for this outcome. And remember the goal here. The goal here is not just to do interventions. The goal is to find activities that you can do in the relational contact with the family to produce the goals of the phase, because those are the building blocks of successful change. Now, to be purposeful in your practice, it takes two things. It takes thoughtful planning. It is not possible to do good family therapy without planning. Now, planning doesn't mean that you don't anticipate and don't want to include the voice of the client. What it means is you know the activities, the goals, you know what you're looking for, and you're going to combine that and translate that to the immediate session-by-session needs of the family. Thoughtful planning is how you prepare to make that match in the room. Without thoughtful planning, it's very difficult to be a creative therapist. Now, if you're going to be a thoughtful planner, you need feedback. You need feedback to translate it, and that feedback comes from the family. That is their view of the session-by-session impact, progress, and alliance that they feel. That's why we measure that. So at the end of the day, what does it take in the real world? Being purposeful, that's based upon your thoughtful planning and feedback, and that's built on this information you're gathering here and the skills that you'll have in translating that information to practice. Our approach, as you know, is to use our model, training, comprehensive measurement. We have a robust measurement system and feedback, and ongoing quality improvement and program development in order to help improve the model along the way. But in terms of implementation, it takes something much more specific and much more focused in an idiosyncratic way on the family. It is about clinical decision making. And we want to suggest to you that the best way in which you can be helpful to a family is to focus and spend time in the decision making that you make about what to do in a case and what to do in a session. What that means is the valuable time in thinking through the case outside the room is essential in planning, and you need to take planning time in order to do that. However, even with decision-making and thoughtful decision-making, you need to have something that helps you adjust that. That is our precision-based approach. And the notion here is the FFT phase goals help direct you. The client feedback helps fine-tune your direction, and both of those contribute to your ability to hit the target, so to speak, for that session. Anything you're trying to hit with a target, you're going to miss left, you're going to miss right, you're going to miss high and low, and the feedback helps you adjust, because in sessions, it's not about delivering things once, it's about constantly delivering and in real time using feedback to make it fit. For us, we've done that through a clinical decision-making process where we ask you to do reflections after each session in a progress note. We ask you to then plan the next session in a session planning guide. We also ask the client what their voice is, and we have a systematic way, session by session, and at the beginning and the end, of asking them, what do they think about the impact they're experiencing? Do they sense progress in the family? And do they have a sense of alliance between each other and with you? To get there, it's called precision behavioral health, and it's a measurement-based care system. And the idea is, when you have a systematic way of clinical decision-making and a comprehensive measurement system, you can tailor the treatment session by session to fit the characteristics of the family. That allows you to integrate the family voice session by session into your decision-making, and it lets you use clinical measurement to inform that decision-making. What that means is that you get evidence that goes beyond what you can see, beyond your own values and your own limitations, and it brings something from outside that you might see to the table. And it's a way for you to make sure that the quality of what you produce, the quality of the sessions you have, continues to get better. And in the long run, you and your team will be able to be somewhat of a local scientist. You'll be able to study the outcome of your cases, how they went, did they go well, how many are going well, how many are dropping out. It's very remarkable when you can begin to look at your work as a scientist, where you can see, am I making the difference that I hope to make? A precision behavioral health care approach allows all of these things to occur, and this is essential to the FFT implementation process. Now, we do all this by trying to leverage technology because this is a complicated set of things to do. Measure things session by session, document and help you have an interactive and dynamic clinical decision-making process. So we have a computer system called Care4. You're going to learn all about Care4 as you go through the rest of the training. It'll help you do a number of things. It'll help you schedule sessions, have easy access to client information, do treatment planning, process and develop benchmarks, look at outcomes, do the evaluation things we talked about. And what's nice about the Care4 system is it's easy, it's engaging, you can do it on your desktop, you can do it on your phone and a mobile device in the field, and it produces in real time valuable clinical information that you not only need, but that you use to match each session to the client. Now, the Care4 system is, like I said, easy to use. Notice from the screen, it's pretty simple to start to get a sense of the feedback. Here would be my client list. And notice, you can see the things that are red, the things that are yellow, and the things that are partially green. You can also tell when the last session was, when the next session was, and what phase the clients were in. And on the right side, you can see there's even a to-do list to keep you on target. Care4 helps bring the important information about a case to the table. Here you can see the number of incidents in a case. You can see the family members. You can get quick reports and see all the documents that you may have produced about that client, in addition to their current real-time status. Those are the yellow circles you see. Care4 is also a place for you to get resources. There's the documentation tab that has training videos. It has manuals. It has everything you need in order to both use the Care4 system and the FFT measurement system in order to implement it well. And within the Care4 system, we produce videos for you. There's a whole number of videos so that you can very quickly turn to the document training section and get information about how measurement works or any question that you might have. We've tried to make the Care4 system self-contained, easy to use, so that you don't have to move to a different system. Now, implementing FFT and using the measurement, clinical decision, and the Care4 system works like this. As a case comes into Care4, there is a family-focused intake assessment. Now, that intake assessment, we've built those tools into the Care4 system. They have the important FFT things. They talk about adult, youth, family functioning. They talk about violence and safety needs and case management needs. When that intake is finished, before seeing the case, you and your team review the case, and you do an initial case and session plan. The case plan helps you focus your attention on the needs they have that were gleaned from intake. And the session plan asks you to make affirmative statements and plans about what you'll do about those. The end of the case plan is what we call the first session plan. And it helps you walk through characteristics of the intake and think about core relational themes and reframing ideas that you might want to use in the first session. The point being that you can get a quick, fast start so we can build engagement from the first moment of the first session. In addition, it'll help identify risk and other areas of things that you need to find more out about. As you enter FFT, again, you'll do clinical decision-making tools. You use those at each session. We'll do measurement at each session. So at intake, it looks like this. There's a referral and intake to a case plan. During treatment, each session, you'll do a progress note following the session. You'll look at the client feedback and do a planning guide before the session that comes after. Discharge, we repeat the referral information. That allows you to have an entry point and an exit point to determine whether or not the work that you did with the family was successful. We have a number of clinical measures built into the system, and there's some manuals and there's information on the document tab to help you with that. We'll also go through these later in the training. But these tools are intended to systematically monitor and evaluate a number of different areas. Now, depending on your program and depending on your team, you may use all these or only some of these, but these are the extensive, robust nature of what we do. We're looking at child, adolescent, and youth mental health functioning and substance use, family functioning, family stability, family risk. We look at trauma exposure and symptoms, impact, alliance, and progress. We have a wide variety of psychometrically sound tools that are built into Care4 in order to accomplish this. Now, the way the measures work is like this, and it's important, and it seems a little complicated at first, but it becomes pretty easy. At intake, the intake team or you will do what's called the Family Outcome Measure Intake, and there's one for the youth and caregiver. That measure looks at family functioning and individual functioning. Every time you have a session, you will do a session impact scale for that phase. And before you make a phase change, you'll do an assessment we call the FAM instead of the SIS. The FAM helps you determine the stability of the family before moving on. As you do sessions in the middle phase, you'll do the session impact scale for behavior change, a FAM at the phase change to determine if they're stable enough, and then the same in the generalization phase using the session impact scale generalization, until at the end you'll do discharge with the FAM-D. When you do the FAM-D, the youth and caretaker take their version, and there is a therapist version of the FAM-D that you use to complete and close the case. Now, what's nice about this is that all of these assessments turn into reports that you can use to quickly glean and get information. There's a family impact report, a stability report, and an outcome report that pull this information together so that you can see in an organized way with graphs and charts the improvements the family made or how they stand session by session. There are treatment planning tools that then you use and you incorporate the feedback and the evidence into. Session by session, you're going to be looking at something quite different because session by session, we have indicators that are intended to optimize family voice and turn that voice into something useful so that you can help plan each session. The family voice, we're looking at three things. Session by session, we ask, what's the impact we're having on you? And we do that with specific focused questions on each of the phases. So impact in engagement and motivation is about feeling blamed. Impact in behavior change is more about understanding what skills you're going to use and how to implement those. And in generalization, it's the ability to remain stable. All across the phases, we ask about progress. Progress in school, progress at home, progress in family functioning. And then lastly, we ask about symptoms and alliance along the way. We also ask your view on the same thing. And from those items, we're able to let the Care4 system turn them into useful, what we call quick look views. What I mean by that is there are colors and graphs that allow you to see what's good, green, what's average, yellow, what's bad, red. When you get to the impact report, you can always also see each of our items, alliance, impact, and progress, and to look at not only your view, but each of their views. And we can look at the same thing by phase. Quick, easy to use, easy to see feedback so that you can quickly incorporate it into your decision making. Now, reports, as I said, there's a number of them, easy to get, and they're both clinical reports and administrative ones. You can also determine all the work you've done in a week. You can look at the cases you've seen. You can do a member activity report, a fidelity report, many of the other things that are necessary. The notion here is if you put your work in Care4, we can pull out what you need for your organization and the system in which you work so that you don't have to spend time on that. And instead, you spend time on the clinical work. Now, where does all this lead? Because the creative part of FFT in implementing FFT is to take all this information and your good and wise clinical judgment and put it together. So we have created and we use an evidence-based decision-making process that is intended to incorporate all these components. Look at the blue where it says intervene. The first thing you do is you have a purposeful conjoint family session. That's an intervention. You sit with the family and in a relational discussion, you talk about what's up and you help them move forward. After that session, we think it's incredibly important for you to take time, 10, 15, 20 minutes, and reflect on what happened in the session. And in essence, to put the events that occurred in the session through the lens of FFT, helping you understand not only what you did and what you accomplished, but how to understand how the family works. Now, what's important to remember is you'll never get a total sense of how they work. It's an ongoing decision-making process. You have to learn each week about how they work. Progress notes and the reflection you do in the progress note is intended to help you grasp and understand the complexity of how the family works. After you've reflected independently, it's time to look at the family's voice. What's the feedback they've given us? How do they say progress is going? Impact and alliance. Now, again, not only as a whole, but by individual family members. What this means is it allows you to come to the next session and target individual people or target different features of the goals of the phase in which you're in to help accomplish those. Your progress note, feedback from the family, and there's a very quick next session plan. We call it a session planning guide. The session planning guide pulls together what you've done into a quick and easy way to look and gives you a hint about knowing where to go in the session. Now, the session planning guide is something that can be printed out. You can take it into the session. It can serve as sort of a cheat sheet for you about where to go. Purposeful intervention, therapist reflection, family feedback, and a next session plan. This occurs all through each session in each phase of FFT. You've got a big task ahead of yourself. You have a lot of information, there's a lot of knowledge here, and there's a lot more to come. It is going to be about repetition, repetition, repetition. Watch, read, practice, get help in lots of ways and ask. Remember your questions, bring questions to the webinar, to your consultant. There'll be feedback from Adaptware, remember. We'll look at your success rate, the time you spent watching the videos and things. And at the end of the day, remember what this is worth. All of this work is about helping families. It's hard work. It's complicated work. It is not easy work. And if we're going to be able to help families, we're the ones that need to put the effort in at the end of the day. We're the ones that need to take the extra steps. They're the ones that need to consume our good evidence-based clinical decision-making.